I love Halloween. The one time of year when everyone wears a mask, not just me. People think it's fun to pretend you're a monster. Me, I spend my life pretending I'm not.
How's it going, everybody? Too Spooky here, and in this video, we're counting down 101 facts about Dexter. When it comes to what information to expect within this video, we'll be covering everything that has to do with obscure or generally unknown information about the series, its history and production, the characters, the cast and crew, and so much more. So if you end up learning something new, be sure to drop a like. Before we begin, take note that there is a massive spoiler warning for the original Dexter series, New Blood, and also Original Sin. I really can't stress enough that I will be spoiling a lot throughout this video, so if you have yet to watch Dexter, please do yourself a favor and leave this video. Dexter is one of my personal favorite shows of all time, and you owe it to yourself to at least watch seasons 1 through 4 before spoiling yourself on anything else. Either way, proceed at your own risk. Without any more delay, let's jump right into it. Number 1. To start with a quick little overview of Dexter's history, before it became a popular TV series, Dexter began with the book Darkly Dreaming Dexter by author Jeff Lindsay in 2004, where it was immediately met with critical success and even won the 2005 Dillies Award. Like many other books before it, its popularity would result in the story being adapted for television not long after, being brought to Showtime by Sarah Colton and John Goldwyn. Although it was pretty much unanimously agreed upon to be a TV series, there were some whispers about it being adapted as a film instead. However, thinking most producers would see it as just another slasher movie, that idea was quickly put to rest. The pilot episode would then be written, produced, and adapted for television by James Manos Jr., before the rest of the first season would be taken over by fellow executive producer Clyde Phillips, who would go on to become showrunner and head writer. Dexter would then air on Showtime from October 1st of 2006 to September 22nd of 2013, consisting of 8 seasons. Along the way, it would become the highest viewed show in Showtime's history, additionally being nominated for and winning a plethora of awards across its original run, cementing it as one of the best television series of all time. That said, it wouldn't be without its fair share of hiccups, as Clyde Phillips would step down as showrunner after season 4's finale to spend more time with his family, which most fans agree is where the show probably should have ended. But considering it was Showtime's highest rated and highest viewed show, they obviously wanted to keep it going, bringing on Chip Johannesson as showrunner for season 5, who was previously a key producer for the show 24. However, Chip would also step down after the 5th season wrapped up, to which Scott Buck would be promoted to showrunner for the remainder of the series. Scott was a producer and writer for the show on all the previous seasons, and no doubt did his best with the monumental shoes he had to fill. But after season 5, the show had a noticeable dip in quality overall, eventually leading to the series' controversial ending, which is not only the lowest rated episode of the series by far, but also considered to be one of the worst TV show endings of all time. Me personally, I consider it to be the single worst ending of any media I've ever experienced. But that's beside the point. Ending on such a low note, what was once unanimously considered one of the greatest shows of all time suddenly ended with severe disappointment from fans and critics alike. But at the same time, leaving it open-ended gave those wanting more a small shred of hope that maybe someday Dexter would be back. Number 2. Following its awful finale, Dexter would lay dormant for nearly a decade, and throughout those years there would be numerous whispers of a potential revival, with many members of the cast and crew even expressing how they would love to do another season. But sadly, those whispers would be shut down time and time again. At the same time, original showrunner Clyde Phillips saw the finale's negative reaction, along with all those who were crying out for the show to return. So over the years, he attempted to find some way to give Dexter a redemption of sorts with a follow-up story, but he struggled to find the proper path to make it happen. And each time he felt he had an idea that might work, he would share it with Dexter's actor, Michael C. Hall. But Michael was adamant about not returning unless he was positive the fans would be satisfied this time around. So ultimately, nothing would come of it. That is, until mid-2019, when Clyde got a call from Showtime president Gary Levine, where he told Clyde that he felt the time was right for Dexter to return. To which Clyde wrote a preliminary script that Michael ended up loving, and just like that, Dexter was back, and with the original showrunner to boot. When it came to the sequel series development, it was decided that it would be taking place 10 years after the events of the original finale, but still continuing the original story rather than making it some sort of alternate ending. With that in mind, when officially writing the episodes, the ending was decided first, with everything else being written backwards from that. Before the new series released, Clyde would even go on to say, and I quote, "The ending of this one will be stunning, shocking, surprising, unexpected, and without jinxing anything, I will say that the ending of this new season that we're doing will blow up the internet." The 10-episode sequel series, Dexter New Blood, would then air from November 7th of 2021 until January 9th of 2022. While it was airing, it once again became Showtime's most viewed show, as fans and critics alike were enamored with Dexter's return, as it proved to be an exceptional return to form for the character that kept viewers hooked week after week. That is, until the finale that was supposed to blow up the internet happened. And let's just say it didn't exactly blow up the internet at all. In fact, all it really did was piss off longtime fans of the show even more, as the finale for New Blood proved to be yet another awful ending, even going on to be the worst rated episode of the entire series, rated even worse than the original finale. It's almost like the concept of ending Dexter is just cursed at this point. I hate to say it, but I think you jinxed it after all, Clyde. While most people agree the concept of New Blood's ending wasn't exactly bad, myself included.
Open your eyes and look at what you've done!
Are you a serial killer?
Yes. Open your eyes and look at what you did! It is over when I say it is!
I know I'm a monster.
It's hard to defend it when the execution of the idea was incredibly rushed, and brought Dexter to a point that felt very out of character, overall making the entire season feel almost pointless. Regardless of any hindsight, we were now left with not one, but two awful endings for an otherwise incredible show. And just like that, Dexter would fade away once again. But this time, not for long. Number 3. Following the release of New Blood, a second season was initially already in the early stages of production, which would have followed Harrison as the main character, picking up where Dexter left off and adopting the code himself, bringing a different meaning to the title, New Blood. However, at the beginning of 2023, it would be confirmed that Showtime decided not to move forward with New Blood's second season, but instead of actually putting Dexter to rest, with their upcoming merger with Paramount Plus, they were looking to develop multiple Dexter spin-off series, most notably deciding to move forward with a prequel series first, which was initially dubbed Dexter Origins. This prequel series would eventually become Dexter Original Sin, a 10-episode series featuring a new cast playing the younger versions of the characters we all know and love. And once again at the helm is Clyde Phillips as the showrunner. This prequel will also be picking up right after the finale of New Blood, as the entire season of Original Sin is meant to be Dexter's life flashing before his eyes after getting shot in the finale, showing us more of Dexter's younger self, including when he first got his job at Miami Metro, and how he took his first steps toward becoming the Bay Harbor Butcher.
I really hate that name.
Without going over the entire cast, Dexter's younger self in particular is being played by Patrick Gibson, with Molly Brown as Deborah Morgan and Christian Slater as Harry Morgan. All while, Michael C. Hall is here to reprise his role as Dexter's inner monologue.
That was the first time I ever felt someone else's fear.
Dexter Original Sin would air from December 13th of 2024 to February 14th of 2025, being extremely well received by fans and critics alike. While making this video, a second season of Original Sin has been announced to be in production. Although, the announcement happened on April 1st, so admittedly I thought it was a joke. But no, this announcement is legitimate, so get ready for more Original Sin in due time. Since the prequel is very new at this time, I won't be spoiling anything about it. But one thing I do need to point out is that this prequel does retcon quite a bit from the original series, namely the absence of characters like Captain Matthews, who was present in flashbacks of Dexter's teenage years, which would imply his status at Miami Metro at this time. And also the complete absence of Dr. Evelyn Vogel, who canonically should have been meeting with Harry during the events of Original Sin. Clyde would go on to say, regarding Vogel in particular, that she was created after his time on the show, and when writing Original Sin, she simply didn't exist in his consciousness, and therefore wasn't included. So I guess there's a chance she could come up in season 2, now that a second season is on the horizon. But honestly, I would much rather we just pretend that plot point never happened. Regardless, if you're a Dexter fan, you owe it to yourself to check out Original Sin if you haven't already. Number 4. In addition to Original Sin, on July 26th of 2024 at San Diego Comic-Con, it would be announced that another Dexter series was in production, which is meant to be a sequel series called Dexter Resurrection, which is once again helmed by showrunner Clyde Phillips and starring Michael C. Hall as he reprises his role as Dexter, taking place right where New Blood's finale left off after Dexter was shot by Harrison. With additional cast members Jack Alcott, David Zayas, and James Remar announced to be reprising their roles as Harrison, Angel, and Harry respectively, with the addition of Neil Patrick Harris, Uma Thurman, and Peter Dinklage signing on as guest characters, along with Kristen Ritter joining the cast as a killer who goes by the name Lady Vengeance. While this news is definitely exciting, it's also extremely contradicting, because following New Blood's finale, Clyde Phillips would go on to make this comment in an interview: "I have 3 words for you. Dexter is dead." I wouldn't do that to the audience. It would be dishonest. Here, there is no question that this is the finale of Dexter. Dexter is dead.
Recharging. 3, 2, 1.
Yet, with the announcement of Dexter Resurrection at the hands of Clyde, it appears that he changed his mind about Dexter's death after all, and decided to retcon it so he can come back for Resurrection.
So that was a f***ing lie.
Clyde would later claim that this comment was because at the time of New Blood's production, Michael was adamant about only coming back to wrap things up, so he wrote New Blood with that in mind. However, when Paramount was looking to expand Dexter's story with new shows, Michael would approach Clyde saying that playing Dexter was in his veins, and he was down to do more, hence his revival. So yeah, Dexter is officially alive and coming back for another sequel. As far as the plot goes, the official teaser claims that Dexter wakes up from a coma to find that Harrison has disappeared without a trace. Realizing the weight of what he put on his son, he decides to try and find him, which brings him to New York City in his quest to make things right. All while, Angel Batista is hot on his trail. As father and son navigate their own darkness in the city that never sleeps, they soon find themselves deeper than they ever imagined. And the only way out is together, with the series officially beginning on July 11th. Although, Michael C. Hall did mention in an interview that Resurrection could potentially be multiple seasons, so with Resurrection and Original Sin, we have 2 new chances to give Dexter an actual good finale. Or if the show really is cursed, you can expect 2 more awful endings in the near future. We're going 4 for 4, baby. On top of that, there is also currently a spin-off in the works surrounding a younger version of the Trinity Killer. It's recently been confirmed to be moving forward with production, with John Lithgow reprising his role as Trinity's inner voice, although any other information on the plot or a potential release date are currently unknown, so look forward to that as well. Number 5. Since we've been talking about Dexter's various awful finales up to this point,
Hey yo, what the fuck?
It should be noted that had Clyde Phillips decided to stay on the show during its original run instead of leaving after season 4, he claims he had a much different ending for the series in mind, which he would go on to explain for the first time during an interview following the series finale in 2013. In the very last scene of the series, Dexter wakes up, and everybody is going to think, oh, it was a dream, and then the camera pulls back, and back, and back, and then we realize, no, it's not a dream. Dexter's opening his eyes and he's on the execution table at the Florida Penitentiary. They're just starting to administer the drugs, and he looks out through the window to the observation gallery. And in the gallery are all the people that Dexter killed, including the Trinity Killer and the Ice Truck Killer, le𝕾pudmann, who he was responsible for killing, Dokes, who he's arguably responsible for, Rita, who he's arguably responsible for, le𝕾la, all the big deaths, and also whoever the weekly episodic kills were. They are all there. That's what I envisioned for the ending of Dexter. That everything we've seen over the past 8 seasons has happened in the several seconds from the time they start Dexter's execution to the time they finish the execution and he dies. Literally, his life flashed before his eyes as he was about to die, which would have been a perfect ending compared to what we got. So knowing that now, having Dexter get shot by Harrison at the end of New Blood seemed to be Clyde's compromise to reach the conclusion of executing Dexter like the original idea for his ending, while still staying true to the events that took place in the original series, which, as we know now, wasn't received well by audiences at all. With all that in mind, when we now look at Original Sin and the return of Dexter with Resurrection, this very well could be Clyde attempting to bring his original ending to life, as Original Sin begins with Dexter's life flashing before his eyes to show us more of his past. And while this is purely speculation for Resurrection, having Dexter be revived could be the start of a series that sees Dexter have to actually face his crimes, potentially even ending with the death penalty that Clyde envisioned so many years ago. Of course, only time will tell. Either way, you potentially heard it here first. On top of that, Clyde claimed in that interview that he had never told anyone his idea for the original ending before. However, following the negative reception of Dexter's original finale, producer John Goldwyn would reveal at a New York Film Festival that Showtime straight up manipulated the outcome of the ending by strictly forbidding the writers to kill off Dexter, which is ultimately what led them to kill Deborah instead. So regardless of if Clyde was telling the truth or not, it seems that no matter where the series was heading, it was always meant to end with Dexter's death, in one way or another, and we'll have to see if Resurrection stays true to that or not. Number 6. Going back to the novels that inspired the show, Jeff Lindsay's Dexter series consists of 8 books: Darkly Dreaming Dexter, Dearly Devoted Dexter, Dexter in the Dark, Dexter by Design, Dexter is Delicious, Double Dexter, Dexter's Final Cut, and finally, Dexter is Dead. It's important to note that the first book alone is namely what inspired the show, as the majority of the first season's content is directly adapted from the book, including the characters, the setting, and even the plot. However, following the first season, the books and the show take very different directions, to the point where the rest of the TV series is a completely different story from the novels. This was in big part to the fact that the novels were releasing alongside the show's original run. So instead of bugging Lindsay for every single plot point he had planned for the next 10 years, they simply decided to write their own story. It's hard to illustrate just how different the books really are, because there are an astronomical amount of differences after book 1. And it would honestly be a disservice to the novels to sit here and try to compare all of them. So I'd recommend you just read them yourself if you're interested in seeing the characters follow a completely different story. But for 2 examples of major differences, just to give you a little taste, Dexter actually has a daughter in the novels, named Lily Ann, rather than a son named Harrison like in the show. Additionally, Dexter's stepchildren, Astor and Cody, are actually meant to be somewhat sociopathic themselves, to which Dexter plays the additional role of giving their dark passengers guidance, like Harry gave to him. Number 7. When it comes to how Lindsay came up with the idea for Dexter and his character, it all began when Lindsay was asked to speak at a business meeting in his hometown of Miami, Florida. Specifically speaking on how the creative arts are important, and how crucial it is to read actual books from time to time. However, as he was looking out into the audience, he was entranced by how fake these businessmen were acting. Smiling when they didn't mean it, making sure to hand out all their business cards, lying to each other, chewing with their mouths full, etc. And while in this trance, a thought abruptly popped into his head, that maybe serial murder wasn't always a bad thing. Not exactly that he wanted to kill all these people himself, but the more he thought about it, the more he could find a way to justify it. Throughout the rest of the meeting, he proceeded to take notes of these justifications on the back of napkins, and by the time he went home, he already had the basis for the first book, and the initial idea for Dexter's character. His overall goal with Dexter as a character was to make a sociopath as likable, funny, and charming as possible. because ultimately, while Dexter commits these heinous murders, he wants the reader to find themselves siding with Dexter and his code. Because, for example, if Dexter is killing someone who disembodies children, he wants the reader to initially agree that that person definitely deserves to die. But at the same time they catch themselves siding with Dexter, he also wants them to have that realization that even if the person Dexter's killing might deserve it, they're still siding with a killer themselves, creating an interesting philosophical and moral debate within their heads as they read further, essentially creating the ultimate anti-hero and a sympathetic villain simultaneously.
The worst killers in history are usually the ones who think the murders were somehow just, even deserved.
But there's never any justification for killing.
No. Well, one, of course. To save an innocent life.
To save an innocent life.
In the process of creating Dexter, Lindsay had to do a lot of research on sociopaths, serial killers, and the like. At first, he would consult experts on if a sociopath would do this or act like this, and it got to a point where Lindsay was writing exactly how a sociopath would act on instinct, which admittedly creeped him out a little bit. Before naming the first book Darkly Dreaming Dexter, he instead wanted to call it Pinocchio Bleeds, which was a title suggested by one of his daughters, and he absolutely loved the idea. His publisher disagreed. And when deciding on the name Dexter for the titular character,
Hello, Dexter Morgan.
He chose it because in Latin, left is sinister and right is Dexter, essentially meaning that Dexter was the opposite of sinister, symbolizing the character's normality on the surface, but darkness within. Lindsay additionally wanted to title the first book The Left Hand of God, to further play on this Latin inspiration, but his editor hated that name too. Number 8. Like we mentioned in the previous fact, Lindsay researched many different serial killers and sociopaths to accurately develop Dexter's character. But you might be wondering, which serial killers influenced Dexter's creation the most? Well, the truth is, from my research for this video, I couldn't find any interviews where Lindsay actually commented on those influences directly. But that said, there are plenty of articles that claim to know which serial killers Dexter was based on, with no source listed on how they got that information, which has been spread all around the internet as fact, when in reality, there's a good chance someone just made it up.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
So with that in mind, I want you to take this fact with a grain of salt, because there are two serial killers in particular that Dexter is speculated to be heavily based on. But because Lindsay has never confirmed this himself, it might very well not be true and merely a coincidence. That said, the two killers who are speculated to have influenced Dexter's creation the most are Pedro Rodriguez Filho and Manuel Pardo. Pedro Rodriguez Filho was born on June 17th of 1954 in Minas Gerais, Brazil. While there's a lot we could cover about Pedro to the point where this could be an entire video in its own right, Pedro's notorious crimes would begin when he was only 14 years old due to his defining trait of hating injustice. Pedro's father would be fired from his job as a night security guard for a local school, following accusations that he had been stealing food from the cafeteria. While Pedro's father denied the accusations and claimed it had to have been the daytime guard, this criminal accusation prevented him from finding other work, and considering Pedro's family was quite poor, this was basically a death sentence for his siblings. Angered by this injustice, he sought revenge against those responsible, and after letting his rage boil for a while, he decided to wait outside the city hall for the deputy mayor late at night, the very man responsible for hiring and firing his father. And when the deputy mayor drove up and exited the vehicle, Pedro walked up with his grandfather's shotgun and shot the deputy mayor, killing him instantly. A month later, Pedro would confront the daytime school guard when he started his shift, pointing the same shotgun at his face as he instructed him to sit in a chair in an empty room. The man apologized and begged for his life, but Pedro shot him point blank before covering him with furniture and lighting the room on fire. After taking refuge at his grandmother's house, Pedro would soon meet a woman nicknamed Booty, who was the widow of a well-known drug trafficker in the area. After making her acquaintance, the two would start a relationship, even though Pedro was still only 14. and Booty would get Pedro involved with her late husband's gang, where he would begin trafficking drugs, along with robbing and killing rival drug traffickers. Before long, a deal would be tipped off to the cops, resulting in Booty being killed and Pedro managing to flee the scene. In the years following this event, Pedro would see himself as a defender of the weak, where he would rob food trucks to feed the hungry, burn shops that cheated their customers, kill men who harmed or assaulted women or children, and even tortured those who harmed animals in the same way they harmed them, granting him even further notoriety. Around the age of 17, he would fall in love with a woman named Maria Arapacida Olympia, who would become pregnant with his child, although tragedy would strike when a rival drug dealer ordered her to be killed, where Pedro would return late one night to find her and his unborn child dead, with their blood smeared on the walls to write, "We will get you." Pedro would then spend the following year tracking down every member of that rival gang and killing them, even killing the leader who ordered the hit on Maria at their own wedding, granting him the moniker Killer Petey. Pedro would even state that during this period, he would kill at least one person every single day. Pedro's carnage would end after he was caught and arrested on murder charges on May 24th of 1973, at only 18 years old. He would then spend the majority of his adult life behind bars, where he would continue to kill various inmates that he deemed as deserving of death for their crimes, including at one point even killing his very own father, who had been imprisoned for murdering his mother, going so far as to cut out his father's heart and eat a piece of it. However, even though Pedro's crimes continued behind bars, Brazilian law at the time prohibited anyone from spending more than 30 years in prison. So, Pedro was released in 2007, although he wouldn't be free for very long, and would embark on another prison sentence in 2011 after suspected rioting, but would be subsequently released with good behavior in 2018. Although officially charged with 71 murders, Pedro estimates he had well over 100 victims in actuality, which would make him one of the 10 most prolific serial killers in history. Following his second release, Pedro would swear off his life of crime, and actually became a YouTuber under his channel Pedrinho X Matador, which today boasts 245,000 subscribers, where he would campaign against gang violence and other criminal acts. His YouTube career would then unexpectedly end on March 5th of 2023, after Pedro was shot by two men in a drive-by, passing away from the wounds he suffered. To this day, no suspects have been apprehended for his murder, and many suspect it was at the hands of the gangs he once terrorized. Obviously, there are a lot of differences to how Pedro's story relates to Dexter, but many speculate that Lindsay first found out about Pedro after he was meant to be released in 2003, and based Dexter's vigilantism off Pedro's moral code of only killing those who harmed others. While Pedro was obviously a very notorious Brazilian serial killer, his name wouldn't become well known to the world until after Dexter became a popular show, to which those who learned about his story would then give him the nickname the Brazilian Dexter. The other killer suspected to have influenced Dexter's creation, Manuel Pardo, was born on September 24th of 1956 in New York. Growing up, Manuel would be a respected Boy Scout and later serve in the United States Navy after turning 18, before going on to serve the Marines. Upon finishing his military service, he would begin his career in law enforcement in the mid-1970s, graduating valedictorian from the police academy he attended, and joined the Florida Highway Patrol, all while getting married and having a daughter. However, he would be fired in 1979 for falsifying traffic tickets. Soon after, he would become a police officer at the Sweetwater Police Department outside of Miami. During his time as a cop, he was witness to many drug-related crimes, including having a child die in his arms from a drug overdose, only to watch the dealers who sold the drugs to that child get off scot-free. The various crimes he witnessed would also lead him to Hitler and many Nazi-related ideologies, such as hating Jews, people of color, and gay people. Following dropped charges of police brutality, along with lying under oath, Manuel would eventually be fired from the Sweetwater Police Force in early 1986, which is when he decided to take the law into his own hands, taking it upon himself to rid the streets of drug-related criminals and actually make a difference.
Drugs ruin people's lives. They kill people. he had his own code. And that was, if they can't get rid of him, I will.
So over the course of the next few months, Manuel would rob, torture, and execute 9 different people for their involvement in the drug trade in one way or another. The one consistent factor was that he made sure each of them knew why he was killing them, and made sure to leave no witnesses. He would also take photos of his victims, write about their murders in his diary, and even kept newspaper clippings that reported on his crimes.
Of course I felt good. I felt great, like I was doing a service to mankind. They have no right to be alive.
During his last murder, Manuel's gun would jam, and in the process of beating the woman to death, the gun would discharge into his foot. Not wanting to be treated locally for suspicion of committing the murder, Manuel would make his way up to New York City, where he would end up being apprehended after using credit cards stolen from the victims. Following his trial, he would represent himself, trying to convince the jury that he was doing the world a service by eliminating these drug dealers that the judicial system wouldn't do anything about.
The only regret that I have is that instead of 9, I wish I could have been up here for 99. But at least 9 is a substantial message.
A lot of people were actually sympathetic to his crimes when they were first reported, and demanded he be set free as a result. But after his Nazi ideologies were brought up in court, and it was discovered he was also dealing drugs, all that sympathy died immediately, as the vigilante, quote-unquote, cleaning up the streets was suddenly a racist hypocrite who fit his own code. Oddly enough, upon the guilty verdict, Manuel himself would demand the death penalty, which was granted, and he would then be executed on December 11th of 2012. It's suspected that Manuel is more so the biggest inspiration for Dexter for multiple reasons, namely that he had a background in law enforcement, and had a personal code that dealt with killing criminals in vigilante fashion. On top of that, since Lindsay's hometown is Miami, he grew up during the same time as Manuel, and no doubt witnessed the news about his crimes as they were happening. Again, both Pedro and Manuel's possible inspiration for Dexter is pure speculation, and has never been confirmed by Lindsay at the time of making this video. So while there are some similarities, it should not be confused as fact. Number 9. Contrary to the last fact, 2 characters from the show who are actually confirmed to be partially based on real-life serial killers would be Arthur Mitchell, otherwise known as the Trinity Killer, and also Kurt Caldwell. Trinity was partially based on Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. Less in the actual nature of their murders, but rather in their personal lives, as while committing his murders in Kansas from 1974 to 1991, Dennis was a married family man with 2 children, maintained a full-time job, had a position as scout leader of his son's Boy Scout troop, and was active in his local church, eventually becoming the president of the church council. To make matters worse, everyone who was acquainted with him described him as normal, polite, and well-mannered, except for those who knew him more personally, noting that he was extremely rude, misogynistic, and demanding. So when it came to the creation of Trinity, the writers were inspired by Dennis's story of being a notorious serial killer for multiple decades, while still maintaining a seemingly normal life from the outside. But at the same time, they wanted to show the darkness that looms behind closed doors.
I am so thankful for you, Arthur.
Shut up, cunt.
While Kurt was loosely based on Robert Hansen, who committed his murders in Anchorage, Alaska from 1971 to 1983. Similar to BTK, Robert was well liked by his neighbors, owned a successful local business, and was known for setting multiple hunting records in the area, which inspired Kurt's character to be known as a local legend who was well liked by the residents of Iron Lake. But the main inspiration for Kurt would be how Robert would abduct women under false pretenses, drive them out into the wilderness to various cabins to assault them, and then let them go, telling them to run so that he could hunt them down like animals through the empty forests. Much like how Kurt would capture teenage girls by offering them assistance, take them deep into the wilderness to his secluded cabin, and then hunt them as they try to escape. It's also speculated that Kurt's practice of preserving the bodies of his victims was based on the Hungarian serial killer Bela Kiss, who attempted to pickle his victims' bodies in giant metal drums that he kept on his property. However, this potential inspiration has never been confirmed. Number 10. Dexter was featured in his very own limited run of comics to coincide with the release of the final season in 2013. They were originally supposed to release with Season 7, but were pushed back for an unknown reason. The comics were published by Marvel, illustrated by comic artist Dalibor Talajic, who was beginning to gain some notoriety from his run of Deadpool and Hitmonkey comics. And the Dexter comics were also written by Dexter author Jeff Lindsay. And with that in mind, the comics take place within the novels universe rather than the shows, taking place before the events of the first book, during the events of the first book, and even adapts some of the other novels. The comics namely center around Dexter encountering his high school bully, Steve Gonzalez, at his high school's reunion, who is not only extremely popular and successful, but also has a dark, sadistic side of his own. While the overall story is namely exclusive to the comics, Steve is mentioned during Dexter in the Dark, making it canon to the novel's universe. A second run of Dexter comics would also release in 2014 from all the previous parties mentioned, called Dexter Down Under, which follows Dexter as he goes to Australia to hunt down a notorious serial killer, but in the process of tracking them down, he ends up trapped in an illegal hunting preserve, where the prey are humans. Number 11. Dexter had an animated web series called Dexter Early Cuts that had a total of 3 seasons, consisting of short episodes that lasted about 2 minutes each. The first season premiered on YouTube on October 25th of 2009, to coincide with the release of the 4th season. It featured 3 segments depicting some of Dexter's early kills that were only briefly mentioned in the show, to expand Dexter's canon history while still remaining unique in a different medium. All 3 segments of Season 1 were written by existing Dexter writer and producer Lauren Gussis, while each segment was worked on by a different cartoonist, those being Kyle Baker, Ty Templeton, and Andreas Vera Martinez, with Michael C. Hall doing the voice work for Dexter. While the first season was well received by those who watched it, it should be noted that there are some inconsistencies with the events portrayed in comparison to what was already shown in the TV series, mainly the dates that these kills supposedly occurred and even the order of the kills in question. The second season of Early Cuts would release 1 year later on October 25th of 2010, to coincide with the release of Season 5, this time called Dark Echo. It was written by existing Dexter writer Tim Schlattman, while illustrated by cartoonists Bill Sienkiewicz and David Mack. Dark Echo told the story of Dexter inadvertently creating a copycat killer, who was inspired by Dexter after witnessing one of his kills. And the third and final season of Early Cuts would release on October 21st of 2012, to coincide with the release of Season 7, this time called All in the Family, which was written by existing Dexter writer Scott Reynolds and illustrated once again by David Mack. All in the Family told the story of Dexter's first encounter with a father and son who killed together. Number 12. The series has also had multiple video games released. The first, called Dexter the Game, was released on September 13th of 2009 for iPhone and Apple devices. Developed by Icarus Studios, the game has you playing as Dexter as you play through the events of the first season of the show, accompanied by cutscenes and full voice work from the majority of the Dexter cast. For just a mobile game, it was actually really in-depth and well made, and received great reviews as a result, including this fun game mechanic where you need to make sure Dexter's dark passenger doesn't reveal itself throughout all his conversations, as if you let the mask slip, it's game over. The game was also planned to be released on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, but for some reason, those plans were cancelled. However, the game would end up being released for PC in 2010. A second game was released 3 years later in September of 2012, titled Dexter the Game 2, for Apple devices once again, but also for Android devices this time around. Developed by Echo Code, the game doesn't really follow any particular story beats of the show, but instead is an open world game where you can explore Miami while also visiting crime scenes that lead you to someone who fits the code, allowing you to get them in the kill room and take them out. This game was received very poorly and largely remains forgotten as a result, as it's a massive downgrade from the first game in pretty much every way. A third game would be released in August of 2015, called Dexter Hidden Darkness, which was another mobile game for Apple and Android devices. Unlike the previous games, it was a hidden object game, where you find and analyze various clues at crime scenes to identify the killer and then take them out. Developed by Studio Blue Buzz Incorporated, it received moderate reviews by fans and critics alike, but would eventually be discontinued after a few years. A fourth game would be released sometime in 2016, called Dexter Slice, which was yet another mobile game for Apple and Android devices, where you basically have to hit these buttons while avoiding various obstacles like knives, each level getting more challenging than the last. All while, the entire game was narrated by James Remar, reprising his role as Harry Morgan. Developed by Gazillion Entertainment, this game would kind of fly under the radar, as there wasn't much advertisement for it, and it has since been discontinued. And finally, a fifth game would come out very recently in December of 2024, called Dexter Original Sin: The Game, being an 8-bit side-scroller where you play as a young Dexter chucking butcher knives at enemies, and really, that's about it. At the time of making this video, anyone can play the game on mobile devices or by going to www.dexteroriginalsingame.com, although I imagine this one will probably go offline within a couple years. Outside of that, if you were on Facebook back in the early 2010s, you'll know that Facebook games were quite the popular activity. So knowing that, it's not really a surprise that Dexter also had 2 games released exclusively on Facebook that have since been lost to time, those being Dexter Slice of Life and Dexter's Disciples. Slice of Life basically had you playing as Dexter in a point-and-click Sims format, where you followed along some of the events of Season 6, while Dexter's Disciples was basically just a trivia game for the show. Nowadays, both games are considered lost media. Number 13. Dexter also had an entire expansive ARG or alternate reality game created for the series, which fans later dubbed Infinity. It began at Comic-Con 2010, with a small area of the con that Showtime called the San Diego Kill Room, which brought those interested into a grisly room where some sort of murder allegedly took place, and was only open for viewing for 2 days. It was noted to be involved with Dexter, but any context as to how it was related wasn't provided. Those who viewed the room were also given a business card that led them to serialhuntress.com, where an ex-FBI agent believed that crowdsourcing cases could potentially help solve murders. While the website itself is no longer available, the videos the agent uploaded are still available on YouTube under the Serial Huntress channel.
Welcome to Serial Huntress. That's me, but you can call me D if the nickname scares you. So, Serial Huntress. Basically, the concept is this: me finding serial killers in a completely new manner than it's ever been done before. I'm coming up with a new system, and I'm calling it crowdsourced crime solving. I'm gonna share all of my cases with you, with as much evidence as I can get clearance for without putting anybody in harm's way. If you have something to contribute, you can post to the forum, post your thoughts, post your videos, post your photos, post your links, post anything that you think might be relevant to the case. That's it. Welcome to Justice by All.
The reason it was called Infinity by those who participated was because the entire goal of the ARG was to eventually track down a murderer known as the Infinity Killer, which took players to multiple secret websites, provided phone numbers you could actually call, featured live streams, forum pages, hidden audio files, tons of Twitter profiles, real listings on Facebook, Craigslist, and eBay, real coordinates that left physical items, and even strange visitors showing up to players' houses in real time to deliver items to them, as players became the investigators, just like Miami Metro's finest, to bring Infinity to justice. Learning about this ARG and everything involved with it for this video, I have to say that this ARG is incredibly large in scale and was extremely well put together. Just the sheer number of things that players would have had to investigate and put together on their own really proves how much of a community effort solving this ARG was. And going in depth with everything that occurred in the ARG would honestly make this single fact like 2 hours long if I covered the entire thing. So I implore you to look into it yourself if you want to learn more. Based on video upload dates for the ARG, it was in development as early as 2009, and ended a few months after its debut in September of 2010, with a livestream determining the fate of both the Serial Huntress and the Infinity Killer themselves.
Goodbye, D.
Number 14. Dexter has also had an official board game released in 2010, where 2 to 4 players act as Dexter as they try to find their suspect, gather their tools, and set up the proper location to eliminate their victim, by transversing around the board. A player wins once they eliminate their target with the proper tools and manage to make it to the marina to dispose of the body. However, if another player manages to catch you en route, they win the game instead, as they caught you red-handed with incriminating evidence. From what I could find, it seems like fans either really love this game or really hate it, but if you're a pretty big fan of the series and enjoy playing board games, I'd recommend giving it a try. Number 15. When it came to Michael C. Hall being cast as the titular character, he almost didn't take the role, as before Dexter, Michael was playing the character David Fisher on the show 6 Feet Under, which follows the Fisher family who owns and operates a funeral home in Los Angeles. It ran for 5 seasons from 2001 to 2005, and after the show reached its conclusion, Michael was heavily considering going back to theater work for a change of pace. However, before he settled on that decision, he got a call about a new pilot for a show called Dexter. Already hesitant about committing to another multi-year TV show, he was further dissuaded once he heard about the plot, thinking, "Do I want to be surrounded by dead bodies for another indeterminate number of years?" However, instead of outright refusing the offer, he at least decided to read the script and the book it was based on, finding himself interested in how Dexter operated in a morally gray area, recognizing that Dexter was a unique character unlike any other, and he wouldn't be able to find another opportunity like it, ultimately deciding to take the leap and accept the role, which obviously changed his life forever, as he would go on to be nominated for and win a plethora of awards for his portrayal of Dexter. And considering he's still playing Dexter to this very day, it's a career-defining role unlike any other. Number 16. In addition to the last fact, Michael wasn't the only actor approached for the role of Dexter. In fact, the number 1 pick to play Dexter was actually Jeremy Renner. However, he declined the offer, as he felt he wasn't capable of playing another serial killer after playing Jeffrey Dahmer in 2002 for the movie Dahmer. Since to even play that role in the first place, Renner had to go to places within himself that absolutely scared him, and he didn't want to go there ever again. With that sentiment in mind, he also declined to play the ice truck killer, which was also offered to him after he passed on the titular role. Outside of Renner, the role of Dexter was also offered to Alessandro Nivola, although it's unknown why he passed on the role. Number 17. After author Jeff Lindsay found out that Michael C. Hall had been cast as Dexter, he was strongly against it.
Okay.
As he had previously seen Michael on 6 Feet Under, where he plays the younger gay brother of the Fisher family. And no matter how Lindsay looked at it, he simply couldn't picture Michael as Dexter. Although, this mindset would instantly change after he witnessed Michael reading a single line within the script, where he would later comment that, "I didn't know there were actors that good, and I didn't know Michael was one of them," further saying that he even started crying on set, as the character he envisioned for so long was essentially right in front of him in the flesh. So he's really glad the producers didn't listen to his initial opinion, and he now thinks Michael was perfect for the role. Number 18. Dexter's first on-screen appearance was during the standalone commercial, Serial Killer by Night, that first aired on September 14th of 2006, before the release of Season 1, which depicts Dexter going from his job at Miami Metro off to kill an unnamed man who would end up in his first box of blood slides. Which means this commercial is possibly even considered canon since we don't know the name of the victim. Additionally, this promo was filmed with 16mm film, rather than digital like the rest of the show. Number 19. When it came to casting Jennifer Carpenter as Deborah Morgan, she was handed the script by her agent relatively early in production, and she thought it was such an exciting concept, but didn't think it would ever actually make it to television because of its dark subject matter. But because she had a lot of free time on her hands before the actual audition, she read the Dexter books to prepare. And while reading them, she noted that she didn't exactly see herself in Deborah at all, and felt like the role might not be a good fit at first, especially since she had never done television before. But because this role would potentially continue for many years, she decided to make her portrayal of Deborah as similar to herself as possible, and really enunciate the characteristics that overlapped. Jennifer would later comment in an interview that the first time she actually felt connected to Deborah's character was at the audition, as while waiting for her opportunity, she accidentally dropped her script and yelled "shit" out of frustration, and that moment of Deborah-like flustered profanity was what made her think, this role might be mine. And she believes reaching that realization is what helped her ultimately land the role. Number 20. Michael C. Hall would end up being diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, or blood cancer, during the filming of Season 4 in 2009, but decided to hide the diagnosis from the vast majority of the Dexter cast during the production, as he didn't want his diagnosis to affect the production in any way, and he kept that secret until he felt he couldn't hide it any longer, and would announce his diagnosis in early 2010 before the production of Season 5. Because of this, he wore a wig for the majority of that season, as he was going through chemotherapy and lost a lot of his hair as a result. Luckily, this fact has a happy ending, as his cancer would enter remission in late 2010, and as of making this video, Michael is currently cancer-free. Number 21. One of the more well-known facts about the series would be that Michael C. Hall and Jennifer Carpenter started dating and even got married after meeting each other on the show, respectfully playing brother and sister. They began their relationship secretly in 2007, and a little over a year later ended up eloping on December 31st of 2008. However, their relationship would soon hit a bit of a snag, as like we mentioned in the previous fact, Michael would be diagnosed with cancer in 2009. Having a loved one afflicted with such a condition out of nowhere is challenging for anyone, but Jennifer stuck by him through his treatment through all the stress it entailed. During an interview in August of 2010, she even mentioned that the past year of their relationship had been an 11 out of 10 on the intensity scale, but she would also comment in that same interview that it became an opportunity to grow and really appreciate each other. In a strange way, his illness was the best thing that ever happened to us. Sadly, that sentiment wouldn't last for very long, as only a few months later in December of 2010, the couple would announce that they had filed for divorce after being separated for months, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason for their divorce, finalizing it a year later in December of 2011. Even after separating, the two of them would obviously co-star together for the remainder of Dexter, and according to the two of them, they are still very good friends even today. While the two of them have never publicly explained their exact reason for divorcing, the National Enquirer claimed to have the full story, which they claim is that when the two of them got married, they both wanted children. However, after his diagnosis and treatment, Michael decided he didn't want children after all, and the couple separated directly after having that conversation. Fast forwarding to 2013, Jennifer would start dating Seth Avett from the Avett Brothers Band, and the two of them would go on to get married in 2016 and have a child of their own. So if children was indeed the reason for their split, it was definitely for the best. Michael would additionally get married in 2016 to Morgan McGregor, so at the end of the day, they both ended up happy. Number 22. In addition to the last fact, I always found it kind of funny that the romance plot between Dexter and Deborah began after Michael and Jennifer got divorced, almost like the producers were f***ing with them in a way.
I went to the church that night that you killed Travis Marshall to tell you that I'm in love with you.
But according to Jennifer, she always knew that Deborah was in love with Dexter, and played her with that in mind from the beginning of the series, so the introduction of the storyline was never a surprise to her, commenting that, "I found it's important to come up with a secret for a character that you don't tell anybody about, and that was mine, that she was confused by her fascination for him. She was crushing on his mind and his mystique." Although she would later comment that she kinda wished that romance plot would have stayed purely as subtext within the show. Number 23. Speaking of Deborah, Jennifer wasn't the only Dexter cast member who auditioned for the role. Julie Benz was given a copy of the script in 2005, and was asked to audition specifically for the part of Rita Bennett. She was a bit taken aback that they asked her to audition at all, because she said the script was one of the best pilots she ever read. Obviously she would get the part for Rita, but she also auditioned for the part of Deborah while she was there, even joking in interviews that she would have auditioned for anyone, including Dexter himself had she been able to. After getting the part, she was exceptionally excited to work alongside Michael C. Hall in particular, as she was a massive fan of his role in 6 Feet Under, apparently to the point where she even had the show's theme song as her ringtone. But she had to change it before meeting Michael, so it didn't randomly go off and out her as a fan. Number 24. James Manos Jr. is more responsible for Dexter making it to television than you might initially think. As I mentioned earlier, the creation of Dexter was all thanks to James writing, producing, and adapting the first Dexter novel for television with the pilot episode. And if you'll recall, a lot of the actors who signed on for the show were blown away by the script, as they thought it was amazing, but didn't think it would ever actually make it to television because of its subject matter. If we dial the timeline back to 1999, television would be forever changed with the debut of The Sopranos. More specifically, the introduction of the main character, Tony Soprano. As up to that point, there weren't really that many main characters on TV who were morally gray and complex, especially not one who was depicted being violent and vindictive, while still remaining sympathetic to viewers. Tony was truly a generational character who opened up TV as a whole to much more complicated characters and subject matter. As without Tony, characters like Walter White from Breaking Bad, Don Draper from Mad Men, and even the expansive cast of Game of Thrones simply wouldn't exist. But this fact also applies to Dexter in particular in more ways than one, as most people agree that the moment The Sopranos changed television forever was with the episode College from season 1, which was written by Sopranos creator David Chase and also James Manos Jr. For those who haven't seen The Sopranos, I do highly recommend it if you like media about gangsters in general. But this episode follows Tony as he takes his daughter Meadow up to Maine to check out various potential colleges. They share a moment of parental bonding when Meadow directly asks him if he's in the mob.
Are you in the mafia?
And while Tony dances around the answer, he does come clean about how some of his income is acquired from illegal means, which brings them closer together, as Meadow appreciates his honesty more than he could ever imagine. However, while they're up there, Tony is positive he spots a former member of the mob who ratted out his peers and went into witness protection, and decides to pursue him, because it's a rule in the mob that you don't rat out your family, the punishment of which is death. But instead of being honest of his intentions to pursue this rat, he lies to Meadow about what he's up to, which damages that newfound trust she just acquired for him, and that trust is never quite repaired again throughout the show. Skipping ahead, Tony eventually catches up with the rat and brutally strangles him to death, which is the very moment that changed the entire scope of what could be shown on television indefinitely. As up to that point, main characters had never been shown outright killing someone so brutally, and according to David Chase, HBO was strongly against having Tony kill this man, as they thought it would be taking one of the best characters in modern television and basically throwing them in the trash by making viewers hate him. But David insisted, and it ended up being the exact opposite for viewers watching at home, who were more enticed than ever to watch a main character who was willing to get their hands dirty like that, making it the first major event in the show that would lead The Sopranos into becoming one of the greatest television series ever made. And since James Manos Jr. was the one who wrote this episode with David that depicted this monumental turning point for Tony's character in public consciousness, he was tasked with being the one responsible for bringing everyone's favorite serial killer to television successfully. As without James's writing and a character like Tony Soprano being so popular, a show about a serial killer as the main character never would have been made. So you can thank James and thank Tony for making Dexter possible in the first place. Number 25. Dexter was rarely shot in Miami outside of season 1, and was barely shot in Florida at all for that matter, as after season 1, production was almost exclusively set in California outside of exteriors and establishing shots, but this was done more so out of necessity rather than anything else. As during the first 2 months of filming season 1, the crew was hit with 3 different hurricanes: Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. And since production for future shoots was likely always going to overlap with hurricane season, causing massive delays for everyone involved, they had to regrettably pass on Florida's generous subsidy and move the entire crew to Los Angeles, whereas New Blood was primarily filmed in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts, with filming schedules for exterior shots being directly coordinated with the weather this time around, as they wanted a significant amount of snow to be on the ground for each shot. Number 26. Michael accidentally crashed the Slice of Life into a pier while trying to dock it, which caused $1,000 worth of damages to the boat and $7,000 worth of damages to the pier. He's mentioned in interviews that the experience was a little bit embarrassing, because after driving the Slice of Life so many times previously, he was sure he knew what he was doing. But at the same time, he doesn't really feel too bad about it, because he didn't have to pay for any of the damages himself. Number 27. Speaking of the Slice of Life, the story of how Dexter acquired the boat was shown in the animated web series, and it was originally called Slice of Heaven. Although, Original Sin kind of retcons this, and implies he actually got the boat from Camilla, and it was originally called Slice of Pie. Number 28. Patrick Gibson, who is playing the younger version of Dexter in Original Sin, has gone on record to say that he's been a fan of the show since he was little and caught glimpses of it as it was initially airing. But he would really become a fan of it after watching it once he was a little older. So when the opportunity to audition for the role presented itself, he knew he had to jump on it. A lot of initial preparation for the role included absorbing as much as he could from the original series, including picking up on Dexter's mannerisms, including his voice, the way he moves, etc. Going so far as to do nothing but listen to Michael C. Hall speak for days on end. And once he felt he had a good grasp on the character, that's when he went about finding ways to put his own spin on it, to really make the role his own. Additionally, he mentioned that the kill scenes were almost therapeutic for him, saying, "That sounds mad, but it's when Dexter is finally himself and has dropped his mask, so it's quite relaxing." Number 29. A lot of the characters' birthdays are the same birthdays as the actors playing them. As for a few examples, Dexter Morgan and Michael C. Hall were both born on February 1st of 1971. Deborah Morgan and Jennifer Carpenter were both born on December 7th of 1979, and even some of the big bads, like Travis Marshall and Colin Hanks, were both born on November 24th of 1977. But obviously there are a lot more examples than this, as this fact is true for the majority of the characters whose birthdays are known. Number 30. We mentioned earlier that the reason Deborah was killed off was in part because Showtime refused to let the writers kill Dexter himself. But another aspect of that decision coming to fruition was because Jennifer Carpenter wanted Deborah to be killed off, which she mentioned in multiple interviews prior to the release of Season 8. Her main reason being that following the events of Season 7, Jennifer forced herself to really feel her character's trauma in a personal manner, regarding everything Deborah went through with killing le𝕾pudmann and helping her brother essentially get away with murder, feeling that trauma so deeply that she felt she had to get rid of it once and for all, which could only be done by having Deborah killed off. But she was also adamant about not wanting her to be killed by Dexter, and instead thought she should die by killing herself, commenting, "I wanted Deb to take the one thing that was totally alive in Dexter's life away." Prior to the filming of Season 8, Jennifer spoke with showrunner Scott Buck about what Deborah would be going through over the first few episodes, and really loved the direction they were taking. She didn't know at the time that this was leading towards Deborah's death, but she had a feeling her wish might be coming true by the way they were talking. However, after actually witnessing the finale, she felt like Deborah was almost vandalized rather than put to rest, further saying, "When I watched it, it broke my heart. He sort of whisked her up, her hair dusting the bench of the boat, the engines have cut off, Dexter putting his cheek next to hers, and he literally slams her into the surface of the ocean, only to descend into the graveyard of the other people who meant nothing to him. On behalf of my character, I thought that he vandalized her and disfigured her entire being." Which was also the moment Jennifer truly realized that Dexter wasn't some sort of neat, respectable monster, but rather a very sick man in need of help. This realization is additionally why Jennifer agreed to come back as Deborah in New Blood, becoming Dexter's inner voice, as since James Remar, who plays Harry, was unable to come back as Dexter's inner voice due to his prior commitment to the show Black Lightning. So Jennifer jumped at the opportunity to really let Dexter have it for everything he's done.
It's me. I'm the Bay Harbor Butcher.
Number 31. In addition to the last fact regarding the trauma Deborah went through in Season 7, the moment where Deborah gives le𝕾pudmann a hug after shooting her was completely improvised, as showrunner Scott Buck decided to leave the cameras rolling after that pivotal moment, which is something they hadn't really done before, and Jennifer, being caught up in her character's emotions, let herself move without thinking, resulting in that haunting moment. Number 32. While the last fact wasn't scripted, pretty much every other element of the show was, as every line of dialogue was supposed to be followed word for word.
Maybe some sort of promotional gag, stay the weekend, you get a jar of blood.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
If any deviations from the script were to potentially be made by the actors, it always had to be approved. However, this changed a bit depending on who was showrunner at the time. But between James Manos Jr. and then Clyde Phillips, that fact always remained true.
Forgot the bread.
Number 33. It usually takes about 12 hours for the crew to set up the typical Dexter kill room, and about 8 to 9 hours to film the average kill scene, as Dexter's kill scenes are usually the most intimate for the cast and crew. The record for the longest time an actor spent tied down to Dexter's table is also apparently 12 hours. Number 34. While there are a handful of characters who learned Dexter's secret over the course of the show, there are a few characters who are theorized to have known, but decided not to do anything about it. While obviously unconfirmed, those characters are Joseph Quinn, Camilla Figg, Jonah Mitchell, Frank Lundy, and even Thomas Matthews. Number 35. During an interview with former showrunner Scott Buck when New Blood finished airing, he shared what his idea for a season 9 of Dexter would have been if he continued on as showrunner. We ended the show specifically in a way that it could come back, because that had always been the intention, and it was actually the network who pitched to me that Dexter be a doctor. I was intrigued by that, but it seemed a little far-fetched that, in just a few short years, he could jump through all the hoops and become a doctor. There was also something interesting about him faking his credentials, but there's also something a little unsatisfying about that. So I pitched the idea that he'd be a paramedic. In a lot of ways, it seemed to make sense, because he's still working on some level with human bodies as a scientist. And it was never that he wanted to help people, that he wanted to atone, but rather, if killing was his heroine, then holding lives in the balance as a paramedic would sort of be his methadone. The idea basically was that Dexter, several years later, had resisted killing all these years. He does get at least some small satisfaction working as a paramedic, but he's still living in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, which seems to be the haunting ground of serial killers. So some new big bad starts terrorizing the area, and Dexter, he's telling himself, just out of curiosity, he's going to look into this. He's certainly not going to do anything about it, but he finds himself gradually being pulled into it more, until finally, the challenge is, this person has to go. All while, he is still sort of secretly watching Hannah and Harrison, because we also showed that Dexter was very skilled with IT. He was able to tap into cameras and street footage and banking accounts. As much as he was trying to distance himself from Hannah and Harrison, he was still watching over them in his own way. Scott would also say that he did write the scripts for this season 9 concept and pitched it to Showtime around 2016. But Michael apparently wasn't a fan of the idea, and generally wasn't interested in returning to play Dexter at that time. So it never came to fruition. Number 36. In a Reddit AMA, author Jeff Lindsay revealed that when writing the Dexter novels, before Michael C. Hall came along, he always pictured Dexter as Johnny Depp in looks and personality. Number 37. Due to the popularity of the show, the name Dexter went through a massive resurgence in baby names, and kept getting more popular year after year until the show's finale in 2013. Number 38. The character Lewis Green was originally going to be a copycat killer of sorts, due to his immense fascination with Dexter. But Michael C. Hall put a stop to that storyline, because he felt it would be way too unbelievable for two serial killers to be working in the same department at Miami Metro. Number 39. Speaking of Lewis, when he is showing off the early stages of his video game in Season 6, which features Miami Metro members as characters in the game, the models featured are actually the same ones from the first Dexter video game. Number 40. Early on in the series, Dexter mentioned that animals don't exactly like him very much. However, in the first episode of Original Sin, Dexter revealed that he's actually a cat person, because as he puts it, they're nature's very own serial killers.
What the hell?
Number 41. While going through all the episodes for this video, you never realize just how much characters in this show are talking on the phone. Like, I swear, it happens at least twice an episode most of the time, and that's being generous. With all these phone conversations happening all throughout the show, there are multiple instances where Dexter in particular is seen talking on the phone while it's upside down. Just a little goof to look out for next time you watch the show. Number 42. While Dexter has no doubt seen a fuck ton of different directors over the course of its run, one episode was actually directed by Michael C. Hall himself, which was his directorial debut, and to this day remains his only directing credit. The episode he directed was Season 8, Episode 2. When asked about the experience, he said, "I went in hoping it wouldn't be as stressful as I feared it would be, and it actually was more enjoyable than I'd imagined. I'd never directed before, but if I was going to take that step, certainly doing an episode of this show made sense. I know the crew very well, and I was able to prepare before we started shooting the season. Part of the deal was that I had to relinquish some of the control over the shots I was in, but it was actually nice to spend time on the set with a more open and available energy." Number 43. In Season 4, Episode 9, The comatose patient has an old marriage photo in the background that is actually of Andy Griffith. Number 44. There's a scene where Dokes confronts Dexter about his background after looking into it, which includes that Dexter is basically a black belt in advanced jiu-jitsu, and that he also not only went to medical school, but also finished at the top of his class. This is never brought up again in the show, but this comment basically implies that Dexter is essentially a non-practicing MD, but decided to pursue a career completely outside of medicine as a blood spatter analyst. In addition to this fact, Clyde Phillips mentioned at a Comic-Con panel for Original Sin that when deciding on the year the show would take place, they decided on 1991 because they needed Dexter to drop out of college to get a job at Miami Metro. So this is a bit of a retcon from what Dokes originally said.
You don't even walk like a normal person, you glide like a fucking lizard on ice.
But I guess you could interpret it as Dexter was at the top of his class, graduated, but never continued his studies. So he was almost Dr. Dexter Morgan. This would also make sense for the potential Season 9 that never happened, as Dexter being a paramedic would fit well with his previous medical studies. Number 45. In Original Sin, one of the most prominent new characters is going to be that of Tanya Martin, the forensics expert at the Miami Metro Police Department, who will be played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. When commenting on the challenges of the role, she said, "I'm used to playing these formidable women, and she's no exception. But she's almost an even bigger exception, because women didn't run departments in those jobs. They certainly didn't run the science departments, and they certainly didn't do it in Miami. Believe it or not, it's actually my dream job." Number 46. Speaking of Sarah Michelle Gellar, there's a small Easter egg in Season 1 that suggests Dexter takes place in the same universe as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. As in Season 1, Episode 11, Angel's ex-wife Nina is disgusted after finding him eating 2 double meat hamburgers from the Double Meat Palace.
Got to be kidding me. 2 double meats?
A man's gotta eat.
The Double Meat Palace is a fictional fast food restaurant from Season 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which obviously stars Sarah as the titular character, who gets a job at that fast food joint, before later discovering it might be serving up ground-up humans to customers. The reason for this unexpected connection is thanks to the writer of that episode, Drew Z. Greenberg, who also worked as a staff writer on that episode of Buffy. You might have noticed that in the earlier seasons, Dexter used a lot more plastic wrap on his victims, but eventually began using less as a sort of trademark, with 4 sections, one at the head, torso, waist, and shins. The reason Dexter started using less is actually because the actors who were getting wrapped up were suffocating, as by wrapping them so tightly, it was discovered by the crew that the plastic was enveloping them so much that the skin was having trouble breathing, to the point where it even became dangerous at times. So they came up with a solution for Dexter to keep his usual MO, while not harming the actors involved. Number 48. The ending theme of the series, titled Blood Theme, was actually a song that Daniel Le𝕾pt, the composer who was responsible for creating the musical score of the series, had written all the way back in 1993, and even used it in the score for the 1993 movie Necronomicon, Book of the Dead, which was a horror anthology film featuring 3 segments based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. At the time, the song was called Because the Dawn. While only minorly different in tone, it was basically the same exact song 1-to-1. And if you're curious, I implore you to go listen to both versions to see what I mean. Number 49. When it came to the writing and production of Season 4, Clyde Phillips and executive producer John Goldwyn created Trinity with John Lithgow in mind to play him, and were so adamant on John taking the role that when they approached him to play Trinity, they shared the entire plot of the season with him, including the big twist at the end, which they hadn't shared with any other actors at that point, basically throwing everything they could at John to convince him to take the role. However, John initially passed on it, telling them, "I won't tell anybody about this, but no, I'm not doing that." It wouldn't be until John's agent and lawyer suggested he take the role considering how popular the Dexter series had become, which convinced John to give it a second thought, and he decided to accept the offer after all. John would go on to win multiple awards for his portrayal of Trinity, so it's crazy to think he almost passed on the role. Number 50. Speaking of John Lithgow, in Season 1, Episode 5, there's a scene where Dexter and Rita are watching the 1983 film Terms of Endearment, which actually features John Lithgow as the character Sam Burns. Little bit of a meta moment, since he would later be cast as Trinity in Season 4. tonight's the night. But maybe tonight can be the final night. My dark passenger has always taken the driver's seat with a craving for blood. But now with one of G Fuel's new flavors, blood, inspired by the Akatsuki from Naruto, I can fulfill that need without the kill. Because that's what it's always been about in one way or the other. Blood. I used to drink the flavor stab stimulant to make the deed a little easier. But now, I can bypass the whole ritual and begin a new one. Drinking blood G Fuel in the morning to subdue the dark passenger's lust all day, every day. With no crashes either. If you want to get 10 to 30% off blood or any other G Fuel flavors, be sure to use code 2SPOOKY at checkout, or follow my link in the description. Now if you'll excuse me, I might as well finish this ritual one last time, since I've already went through all the trouble of preparing it. Number 51. In the New Blood episode, Runaway, Michael C. Hall is actually the one singing in the closing credits of the episode, because outside of being an actor, Michael also fronts the indie rock band Princess Goes since 2018, and their song Ketamine is the song featured in the credits of that New Blood episode. The band has released 2 LPs and 1 EP at the time of making this video. Number 52. Jimmy Schmitz would be brought on to play Miguel Prado in Season 3 to be the foil to Dexter. And according to the producers, they wrote the character with Jimmy in mind, and weren't looking at any other actor to play him. However, Jimmy wasn't initially interested in joining the cast. Instead, he would end up being convinced by Clyde Phillips, as Clyde didn't want to spoil the entire plot for Miguel, but he made sure to explain his dark side to Jimmy. And since Miguel was unlike any other role he had played before, Jimmy decided to accept, saying in an interview, "They promised up front that this was really going to challenge me, that it would be stuff that I haven't done before, and they've really given me a shot. They've delivered the goods." In addition to that, Jimmy is confirmed to be reprising his role as Miguel in Dexter Resurrection. I'd assume he'll likely be presented as a variation of Dexter's inner voice, but we'll find out soon enough. Number 53. Speaking of Jimmy Schmitz, he almost accidentally killed stuntman Jeff Chase on the set of Season 3, as while filming the kill scene in Episode 8, he accidentally picked up a real knife instead of the prop knife he was supposed to grab. Jeff was tied down to the table and gagged, so even when he realized that Jimmy grabbed the wrong knife, he couldn't do anything to alert him of the mistake. Right before Jimmy thrust the knife down, apparently Michael C. Hall also noticed the knife was real and yelled for Jimmy to stop. But it was too late. They had previously filmed 10 takes before that, and Jimmy only hit his mark on Jeff's heart in 2 of them. But during this take, he plunged the knife full force and actually hit his mark dead on. But this was actually a godsend, because Jeff was protected by a small clear plastic cover the size of a post-it note directly over his heart. So when the knife struck the plastic, it didn't pierce his flesh, and instead just gave him a bad bruise. Had Jimmy missed that plastic cover like he did in the previous takes, the knife would have pierced directly into his chest, likely killing him instantly or giving him life-threatening injuries. After the ordeal, Jimmy apologized to Jeff profusely, to the point where Jeff said, "I felt more sorry for him than for myself." Number 54. In many of the crime scenes where Dexter takes photographic evidence with his camera, he uses a Nikon DSLR camera with a 105mm micro Nikkor lens, rigged with a Nikon R1 twin macro flash kit. This is an accurate representation of what a forensic expert might use to gather photographic evidence at real-life crime scenes, as this set of camera equipment allows the photographer to shoot extreme close-up shots without any shadows present. Number 55. David Zayas, who plays Angel Batista, was actually a police officer in real life with the New York Police Department prior to becoming an actor. His previous experience granted him frequent roles as a character actor for law enforcement-related characters, and is what ultimately ended up landing him the role of Angel in Dexter. Since he has that real-life experience, he says playing the character comes naturally. Number 56. Speaking of Angel, he wasn't always portrayed by David, and this is not a reference to James Martinez playing his younger self in Original Sin. Instead, Angel was sometimes played by David's son, David Zayas Jr., during Season 8 of the show, although it was mainly only for certain stunts and stand-in shots where the character's face can't be seen. This was done because David couldn't always make it to set during the last season's production. And since David Jr. looked almost identical to his father in structure and body type. Alright, hold up. I gotta pause the video here for a second because I'm in the middle of editing. I'm putting the finishing touches on this video. And I just now noticed the shirt David is wearing. What the fuck is that? Dude wore the Glizzy Gobbler 5000 to a premiere. It was a seamless way to get the stand-in scenes they needed without interfering with David's schedule. Number 57. When it came to the Miami Metro Police Department's set in Original Sin, the entire set is a one-to-one recreation of the original set, from the very plans used to create the first one. Except this one was fitted to be accurate to what a police department would look like in 1991, including all the outdated equipment from that time period. So other than maybe a window or two being slightly out of place, everything should be exactly how you remember it. Number 58. Actors on the show weren't notified if their characters were going to die until the day of filming for those scenes.
Oh, we're so sorry to hear about your brother that passed away. He gets 5 big booms. Boom! 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 Boom!
As the producers didn't want the actors to know ahead of time, because they figured it would be too hard for them to spend the entire season knowing they were going to have to leave, and feared it might affect their performances. At the same time, telling them right before they were about to film the death scenes made the shock and upset at least partially real. One of the ways they hid this fact from the actors was by handing out fake scripts to them. One of the most notorious examples was Rita's death being hid from pretty much the entire crew, including from Julie Benz herself, as the script she was given had Rita away with the kids in Orlando, which would end with Dexter packing to leave, before seeing on television that a child murderer had just escaped from prison. So then, Dexter had to decide if he wanted to join Rita on vacation or go after this new scumbag, leaving that as the cliffhanger. Instead, Julie found out about her character's death only an hour before the script was released, and didn't find out about how Rita was going to die until an hour before actually filming it. She would later comment that finding out Rita was going to be killed made her bawl her eyes out and initially gave her a panic attack. But since she knew Rita was going to die one way or another before walking in to shoot the final scene, she brought a styrofoam tombstone that said RIP on it and floated it in the bathtub as a joke, as saying goodbye to her character, her job, and the people she loved was just too heavy. Number 59. In New Blood, when Ethan is seen in his room, he has posters of the horror manga Dementia 21 by Shintaro Kago, who is known for his absurdly disturbing Guro works. And next to that is a poster of the anime character Ken Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, a series about ghouls that eat humans, but also live among them in secret. The third poster isn't one that I recognize offhand, but if you happen to know what it's from, be sure to comment below. We talk a lot about anime and manga on this channel, especially of the horror variety, so if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 60. Dexter author Jeff Lindsay was also featured in Season 3 of the show. However, instead of appearing as himself, he played Vice Officer Jeffries. Lindsay would go on to comment that out of everything the TV show did or didn't do, he was most upset that his character didn't get a spinoff. Number 61. When it came to playing James Dokes, actor Eric King went on to say that a lot of Dokes' character was based off his own father, as his father was a police officer, and whenever the two would be watching the show together after the fact, Eric would always point to himself on screen and say, "You know, that's you."
So what's that, a titty site?
Oops, caught me.
Bullshit. What the hell were you really doing in here?
He further commented that because a lot of Dokes' personality comes from a personal place, it's very easy for him to access while in character.
You think I'm here to invite you to my nephew's bris? I didn't know you were Jewish.
Number 62. Speaking of Dokes, Eric has seen the surprise motherfucker meme, and is actually a big fan of it. He said it was initially a bit weird for him, as he had never had a performance taken out of context like that before, so it took some getting used to, like having that soundbite of Dokes added to different films for instance. But once it started taking on a life of its own, he found it really flattering, and now celebrates the fact it ever became a popular meme in the first place.
And it's Doug.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Yep, that's it.
His favorite ideation of the meme is the popular Vine by Darius Benson. Number 63. Back in 2013, Michael C. Hall mentioned in an interview that at one point during the show's original run, he ran into Kevin Spacey, who was very interested in potentially being cast as a future big bad on the series. But after he got cast in House of Cards, it wasn't possible anymore. In hindsight, this is actually kind of ironic, because with all the allegations that came out about Spacey in recent years, he's basically eligible for the code, if you catch my drift. Number 64. Kevin Dutton, a psychologist and writer that specializes in the study of psychopathy, commented on how realistic Dexter actually is in terms of being a psychopath, with key points being that his tendencies developing in childhood, cruelty to animals, and his ability to be incredibly charming and a master of concealment are all extremely realistic. However, he would also note that Dexter is a lot more intelligent than most real psychopaths, as psychopaths who are very intelligent usually end up as a top CEO, a lawyer, or a serial killer. And the areas where Dexter is a bit unrealistic come from his inner monologues.
Just like me. Empty inside.
As it would apparently be very unlikely for an actual psychopath to analyze their own actions to such an extreme degree. Additionally noting that his connection to his family, especially his sister Deborah, is pretty unusual, although, due to new studies in recent times, it's also not completely unheard of, as some psychopaths are known to have attachments to specific people, and in rare cases, are even able to feel selective empathy to those important to them. So all in all, Dexter is not only a realistic psychopath, but also a unique one. Number 65. Baby Harrison was played by identical twins, Luke and Evan Khrushchev, which was done to follow child labor laws that require children to only be on set for a certain amount of hours per day, allowing them to swap out scene by scene to get the footage needed without lengthening the production schedule. Julie Benz would later go on to comment that one of the twins were an absolute pleasure to work with and was always well behaved, while the other one was constantly crying. Number 66. In the season 6 finale, when Travis is looking at Dexter's driver's license, the last 3 digits are shown as 666. Number 67. Lauren Velez's choice to have LaGuerta wear a ton of jewelry on the show was actually thanks to her mother, as her mother came with her to the audition for the part of LaGuerta, and while choosing an outfit, her mother kept telling her to add more and more jewelry, which isn't how she would normally dress. But after sitting through the audition with all the jewelry on, she realized this would be a key trait towards LaGuerta's self-expression. Speaking of Lauren, she would actually end up getting married to James Manos Jr. after meeting on the set of Dexter. Although, upon further research, mentions of their relationship are almost scrubbed from the internet completely, as both of their Wikipedia pages list no mention of their relationship, with Lauren's page even stating she was married to a Mark Gordon from 1993 to 2015. However, she most definitely married James around 2010 to 2011 from what I could find, so the Wikipedia page is clearly wrong. I wouldn't even believe this was true if I didn't personally find a couple old pages mentioning it from the early 2010s, and also finding one of the few public interviews from James where he directly states it.
I married Lauren Velez, who was Lieutenant LaGuerta. As far as I'm concerned, I got the best of that show.
It seems as though the two have since quietly divorced, which may be why Lauren's page mentions a 2015 divorce from Mark Gordon, when in reality that was probably when she divorced James. But any actual mention of when their separation took place or why seems to be absent from the internet. Number 68. In Season 3, Episode 11, in the final scene of the episode, the distorted music that is played once Miguel is dead is actually the regular closing credits played backwards. Number 69. When Dexter is explaining that he's a serial killer who kills serial killers to Harrison in New Blood, Harrison compares him to Batman.
So you're kind of like Batman or something.
Tonight's the night. And it's going to happen again and again. Has to happen.
I like Dark Defender.
To which Dexter explains a time when he killed a clown of his own, like the Joker, named Wiggles the Clown. In the preceding flashback, it's shown that Wiggles has the exact same makeup as Arthur Fleck from 2019's Joker film. Additionally, Michael C. Hall has actually voiced Batman before, in the 2015 TV series, Justice League, Gods and Monsters Chronicles. Number 70. Although it's a blink and you miss it moment, in Dexter Season 6, Episode 5, there's a moment where Dexter is using a printer, and the brand name listed on the printer is Saber, a seemingly uneventful brand to the untrained eye. However, Saber is actually the company that buys out Dunder Mifflin in the Office TV series, where they have the company sell more than just paper, which also includes their faulty printers. So with this Saber printer turning up in Dexter, it shows that Dexter and The Office might take place within the same universe. The Scranton Strangler better watch out. Number 71. Daniel Licht, the composer of Dexter's soundtrack, would go on to write an orchestral version of the soundtrack that he started performing live with a 60-piece orchestra following the original conclusion of the show. While they aren't performing the Dexter soundtrack these days, a lot of these concerts are available to watch on YouTube. Number 72. Once Peter Weller learned that his character, Stan Liddy, who was the former detective hired to investigate Dexter by Quinn, was going to be killed by Dexter, he insisted to the production team that Stan Liddy would not be killed on Dexter's table, which resulted in the scene where Dexter kills Stan in his van. Number 73. In Season 2, Episode 1, during the flashback of a younger Dexter, the building that Dexter is about to jump off before Harry catches him is the same building used in Season 4, Episode 3, as the building that Trinity forces the woman to jump off of. Number 74. Jack Alcott, who plays Harrison in New Blood, admitted that he didn't actually know anything about the show when he auditioned for the role, as when the show was originally airing, he was too young to watch it, and didn't actually check out the original show until he was deep in the audition process. But knowing that it was an extremely popular show, he knew he couldn't pass up the opportunity to try and land the role. Throughout the whole audition process, he didn't even know he was auditioning for Dexter's son, as the producers used fake names for the characters as to not reveal any details about the greater plot. So Jack thought he was auditioning for a character named Randall, who was described as a likable kid, but he's got something dark going on inside him. To which Jack assumed this Randall character was meant to be one of the show's big bads for the season. And it wouldn't be until he made it to the final picks for Harrison that he learned who he was actually playing.
You got big. Happens.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It was around that time he actually started binging the show to prepare. But after mentioning to the producers that he would be caught up before they actually started filming, they encouraged him to stop watching completely, as since Harrison was still just a child when the show ended, he has no knowledge of who Dexter really is, or anything he'd been through up to that point. And they didn't want Jack knowing subconsciously, and having it affect his acting as a result. After New Blood was said and done, Jack was willing to return as Harrison for New Blood's second season, that would have focused on him instead of Dexter. But now with the announcement of Dexter Resurrection, it's been confirmed that Jack will be returning as Harrison. But we'll have to see how prominent his role will be in due time. Number 75. In Dexter Original Sin, it's revealed that Dexter is actually low-key a big fan of horror movies, as he has an entire collection of them on VHS. Although his fascination with them was likely just because it helped feed his dark urges by witnessing some gore, or seeing characters on screen that he could relate to. The movies in Dexter's collection are Stephen King's It, Darkman, The Haunting, Evil Dead, Psycho, Halloween, the Twilight Zone movie, Jacob's Ladder, Amityville Horror 1 and 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Manhunter, and The Shining. As a horror fan myself, I gotta say Dexter has got some good taste. Number 76. Dexter has been known to reference serial killers all throughout the series in different ways. As early on in the series, Dexter used various aliases that reference works from Bret Easton Ellis, such as using the name Patrick Bateman, the main character from American Psycho, as his alias to purchase tranquilizers, and also using the name Sean Ellis when seeing a therapist, which is based on Ellis himself and also Sean Bateman from The Rules of Attraction. This is further referenced in Original Sin, when Masuka helps Dexter make a fake ID with the name Patrick Bateman, and when it comes to his new identity in New Blood, Dexter is named Jim Lindsay, which references the author of the Dexter books, Jeff Lindsay. Then, when considering names for his unborn son, he ponders naming him Charles, Philip, Richard, and Dexter Jr., which are all names of infamous serial killers: Charles Manson, Philip Yablonsky, and Richard Ramirez. And then of course Dexter is kind of self-explanatory. Later on in season 6, while looking through an old notebook of his, you can see newspaper clippings of Jeffrey Dahmer. And in Original Sin, Dexter has a magazine filled with newspaper clippings of Ted Bundy. And finally, in the season 6 episode Nebraska, when Dexter is pondering going to Portland, Oregon, Dexter's dark passenger, in the form of his brother, says,
"It's a little predictable, isn't it? Isn't that where all serial killers go?"
Which references a ton of real-life serial killers who were active in the city. Number 77. In the season 4 finale, when Dexter has Trinity on his table getting ready to kill him, Dexter asks Trinity,
So what's the alternative, Arthur? Leave? Disappear? Fake my own death and start over again?
which is extremely ironic in hindsight, because this is exactly what Dexter would do in the original series finale. Number 78. In Grand Theft Auto 5, during the mission where you enter the coroner's office, there's a little Easter egg for Dexter hidden on the bulletin board, where 2 paper profiles that say Dexter Fisher and Morgan Price respectfully reference both Dexter Morgan and the brand Fisher Price when you put them together. Number 79. Speaking of gamer moments, in Season 3 Episode 10, Dexter is playing Halo 3 online multiplayer on Miguel's office computer, which not only proves that Dexter is an epic gamer, but it also leaves a bit of a plot hole, as at that point in time, Halo 3 was not available on PC, and wouldn't be until 2019 with the Master Chief Collection. You could argue that maybe Dexter was emulating the game, but usually emulators don't allow online multiplayer, especially back in 2008. Number 80. The biggest plot hole of New Blood would be Harrison's age, as it's been confirmed that Harrison was born on March 7th of 2009. However, Clyde Phillips confirmed that Harrison was 16 years old during the events of New Blood. The issue with this is the fact that New Blood is also confirmed to take place during 2021, which based on Harrison's canonical birth date would make him 12 years old instead of 16. Number 81. In a literal moment of manifesting your dreams, actress Jamie Chung was asked in an interview over a decade ago what she wanted to do next with her acting career, to which she said, "I really want to be a part of a show that I love, one being Dexter," as Dexter was one of her favorite shows at the time, which was still in the middle of its original run. And as you may already know, Jamie would later be cast as Molly Park, the true crime podcaster in Dexter New Blood. So talk about a dream come true right there. Additionally, her character's podcast, Mary Fucking Kill, had an episode about Trinity featured within the show. While we as a viewer only get to hear a brief segment of this podcast, the full unedited podcast episode was actually uploaded onto YouTube by Showtime. Number 82. In Season 7, Episode 2, Wayne Randall jumped in front of a semi-truck after enjoying some sun. The truck's cargo says "Sun and Go" on the side, which ultimately is exactly what Wayne ended up doing. Number 83. When it came to Lumen Pierce from Season 5, played by Julia Stiles, her character was always meant to leave by the end of the season, much to the dismay of both the fans and Dexter himself. As executive producer Sarah Colton would later explain, Lumen's entire purpose was to show that all parts of Dexter were capable of being loved and understood, including his inner darkness, even after the massive tragedy he recently went through. At the same time, Lumen was also meant to show that even though some people suffer immense tragedies and go through their own periods of darkness, it's possible to leave all that behind and move on to a much healthier place, even hinting that it might be possible for Dexter to leave his darkness behind as well, although that possibility was never realized. This was further illustrated with the name Lumen itself, as it means to illuminate, which was meant to reflect how she brought light into Dexter's inner darkness. Number 84. In addition to the last fact, to prepare for the role of Lumen, Julia researched victims of abduction, torture, and assault, but found that the material she was absorbing was almost too intellectual of an approach, and she needed something emotionally to connect to. So the aspects that helped her most was researching how victims of PTSD are prone to reacting to specific memories, smells, or sounds that essentially take their minds back to the traumatic event. so she would almost meditate with those thoughts in mind while trying to live, or in this case relive, those horrific events in character, so that she could accurately show the dark reality of how a horrific experience like that would affect someone, as a way to bring comfort to anyone who has actually been through something similar in real life, to show them they aren't alone. As a side note, when talks of New Blood were first circulating, Julia was asked in an interview if she would ever return for more Dexter, to which she said she'd be ecstatic to return, as long as it's done right. Obviously, le𝕾pudmann didn't return for New Blood, but now with Resurrection on the horizon, and le𝕾pudmann being one of the few people who know the true scope of Dexter's crimes, maybe she'll be making a surprise appearance. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Number 85. The props on the show, including but not limited to the various dead bodies, are all thanks to prop master Joshua Meltzer. But the one prop I want to highlight would be Meltzer's unique mixture for all the blood present on the show. If it wasn't completely obvious already, the blood is not real, and instead is Meltzer's very own special mix of food coloring, peppermint oil, maple syrup, and Dawn dish soap. The maple syrup is what gives the blood its thicker texture, and with the inclusion of dish soap, it makes the fake blood significantly easier to clean than corn syrup off of surfaces and out of clothing, while the added peppermint oil is used to prevent bugs like wasps and bees when filming outdoors, as bugs of all varieties would be naturally attracted to the maple syrup. But since they don't like peppermint, it prevents those pests from getting involved. As Meltzer noted that there's nothing worse than an actor lying next to a pool of fake blood, having to be completely still, all while worrying about being stung. While the blood used for Dexter's blood slides is actually made from furniture dye. Number 86. Back in 2008, Dexter came under fire from the Australian government, as Showtime ran an ad for the premiere of the show within Australia, which was a commercial that has Michael C. Hall telling a man at the airport that he's heading to the city of Adelaide.
What's in Adelaide?
Well, apparently Adelaide has more serial killers per capita than any other city in Australia.
I'm from Adelaide. I didn't know that.
Well, now you do.
This claim pissed off the tourism spokesman, Michael Pengilly, which resulted in the ad being pulled off the air. However, this ended up doing a lot more for the show than the ad itself, as once Australian news teams picked up the controversy, the complaint apparently caused more excitement for Dexter in Australia overall, making its debut in the land down under a massive success. While I doubt this is related in any way, we mentioned earlier how the second run of Dexter comics have the titular character visiting Australia, so there's always a slim possibility that this choice of story topic was in response to this controversy. Number 87. The only people who knew Professor Geller was dead during the production of Season 6 were Michael C. Hall and Geller's actor, Edward James Olmos. As before signing on for the role, showrunner Scott Buck and other producers met with Edward to outline what they wanted to do for Season 6. And with the big twist that Geller was dead all along, they didn't want anyone to know about it. Not the cast and crew, not the directors, nobody. That way, when the reveal happens, literally everyone is shocked. On that note, Edward was instructed by those producers to basically be in charge of his character, and how everyone in a scene would interact with him. Basically having Edward direct other actors in his scene to not look at him or acknowledge him, while still making it seem like he's present. And most important of all, he had to do this without the director's knowledge. Number 88. Molly Brown, who is playing a young Deborah Morgan in Original Sin, was actually in Paris with her girlfriend when she got news from her agent that she was one of the finalists for the role of Deborah. However, in suspicion that she wasn't going to get the role, she told her agent to only call her if she gets it. So while still in Paris, a few days later, she was attending the Taylor Swift Eras tour with her girlfriend. And during the last song, Karma, her phone started ringing with her agent on the line. So knowing that meant she secured the role, she started freaking out and left the venue. When it came to playing Deborah, Molly said that adjusting to the character was almost too easy. As usually when you take on a new role, as an actor you have to consider all these different ways to approach it, and it adds this extra pressure of what you as an actor think you should do versus what the director wants, etc. But since Jennifer Carpenter had already established what Deborah was all about, all Molly had to do was play the character like Jennifer would, and that's exactly what she did. Number 89. In Season 1, Episode 9, When Dexter and not Rudy are packing up the house, they are each packing in the way they dispose of bodies, as Dexter is putting everything in plastic bags and duct taping them, while not Rudy is wrapping things up neatly with string. Number 90. In the season 3 finale at Dexter's wedding, members of the show's music team have a role as the wedding band, with Daniel Licht on the keyboard, John Licht on the bass, and Gary Calamar on the guitar. Number 91. In the final season, the Category 5 hurricane that hits Miami is named Laura, which was named after Dexter's biological mother, Laura Moser. Number 92. By the end of the original series, Deborah had used some variant of the word fuck approximately 996 times, with Jennifer's personal favorite profanity being when she called someone a fucking beef bus. Number 93. In Season 8, it's revealed that Masuka has a daughter named Nikki Walters, the result of which is from him donating to a sperm bank in college. However, this is actually a major plot hole, and shouldn't be possible. Namely because if we look at the actor for Masuka, C.S. Lee, he is 5 foot 5 inches tall or 1.65 meters tall, meaning the same is true for Masuka. And sperm banks notoriously have a height requirement to even donate to them in the first place, the bare minimum of which is 5 foot 8 inches tall or 1.72 meters tall, although most require you to be over 6 feet or 1.82 meters tall at the very least. So unless Masuka was pulling some real illegal shenanigans to get his juice in that bank, which honestly wouldn't surprise me, this should not only be impossible, but perhaps even a criminal offense. Number 94. Speaking of Masuka, Season 1 Episode 4 is the only episode in the series that doesn't feature Masuka. You can fact check me on that. Aside from New Blood, of course, where he isn't present at all, outside of his name being referenced in Batista's emails. Number 95. Saving all the Masuka facts for the end, but in Episode 5 of Season 5, the tattoo on Masuka's back is actually a real tattoo. Or at least, it's allegedly real. Because I did find multiple sources that claimed this was a real tattoo. But I couldn't find a picture of C.S. Lee's bare back outside of clips from this episode to fact check it. So if somebody wants to do me and everyone else a favor, if you ever run into C.S. Lee, ask him to show you the tattoo on his back to confirm or deny this one.
Number 96.
After the series initially got popular, Michael noted how a lot of fans he encountered would have him sign knives. However, he decided to stop doing it after it kept happening, because he worried that there was a slim chance one of these knives would actually end up being used to kill someone, and he wasn't sure if he'd get in trouble, having physically signed the murder weapon. Number 97. When asking Michael at a Comic-Con panel how he gets into the mindset of a serial killer for Dexter, and if it affects his mental health as a result, he replied that it doesn't affect his mental health at all. In fact, getting into that serial killer mindset is easy. Although partially joking with that answer, he goes on to clarify that luckily he as an individual doesn't feel that need to actually kill anyone. But when channeling that serial killer mindset, he instead looks at it as if the person he's about to kill in the show is something in real life that he wants to get rid of, like world hunger for instance, which makes it easy to play Dexter's dark side as a result, because he's tricking his brain into thinking he's doing the world a major service, or making it more therapeutic by removing some sort of negative aspect from his own personal life. Number 98. In addition to the previous fact, Michael apparently went around pretending to stalk people shortly after getting the role, as he wanted to see what it felt like to do so, as a way to better get into Dexter's mindset, even mentioning how he never got caught even once, further saying, "If there was somebody alone, I'd follow them around, just to see what it felt like. The key was distance. Don't get too close, and if you feel like you might be spotted, relocate, cross the street." It was pretty easy, especially if it's the busy part of the day. I learned if you're out and about, you're probably being followed by someone. He additionally read various books on the psychology of serial killers, books by FBI profilers, read transcripts of interviews with serial killers, and spent time with the real head blood spatter analyst at the Miami precinct. He did consider interviewing actual imprisoned serial killers, but decided against it because he figured it would freak him out too much. Number 99. As of the completion of New Blood, Dexter has killed a total of 149 people that we know of, which would give him one of the highest victim counts of all time if he were a real person. Although it should be noted that 13 of these victims didn't fit Harry's code, meaning out of the victims we know about, Dexter has killed 136 criminals and 13 innocents. So while he's no doubt done some good by taking out those who debatably deserve to die, he's also killed more innocent people than most known serial killers, so it's hard to truly call him a hero or a villain. On top of that, YouTuber The Cinema Cop recently made a video detailing how many years Dexter would be sentenced if he was caught and charged for all of his crimes across the series, prior to any new revelations that come from Original Sin or Resurrection, of course. According to them, if Dexter was charged for all of his crimes, he would serve 139 life sentences, plus an additional 2,103 years, with a fine of $112,301. That video will be linked in the description if you want to see the breakdown. Number 100. While Dexter himself has no doubt killed an enormous amount of people, Trinity is actually the character in the Dexter series that has the highest victim count, with 281 confirmed victims at the time of making this video. I say that because the Trinity prequel series is happening, so there could be even more than that. Either way, with 281 victims, that would make Trinity the individual serial killer with the highest number of victims of all time if he was real. On top of that, Hannah McKay has the highest number of victims of any female character in the series, with a total of 7. And finally, number 101. Earlier in the video, we mentioned how certain characters were inspired by notorious serial killers, but in a sad twist of fate, Dexter would also inspire a real-life killer of his own, that being Mark Twitchell, who believed himself to be the real-life Dexter Morgan. After failing his lifelong dream of breaking into the film industry with a Star Wars fan film and becoming a father in 2008, Mark would come across the TV show Dexter and immediately become obsessed with it, as Mark found himself relating to the fictional character of Dexter completely, which is something he'd never been able to do before, feeling completely understood as a person for the first time in his life by essentially seeing himself on screen. And after fully diving into the episodes that were available at the time, Mark believed that Dexter was basically showing him the life he could have, where he could kill whoever he felt deserved it, and get away with it as a result. As a typical manipulative nice guy, he already believed that he created the ideal personality on the outside to fool everyone around him, with a wife and child at home to further his cover. And as an aspiring filmmaker, he had the idea to rent out a garage and act like he was making a slasher flick by turning that garage into a film set with everything a serial killer would need. Because nobody would expect the guy making a movie about a serial killer to actually be killing anyone, thinking he finally had the perfect plan and cover to become Dexter in real life. He would find his victims by catfishing men online, which is something he'd already been doing for years at that point as some sort of sick hobby.
I guess we all tell lies about ourselves.
Mark would first attempt to kill Giles Tetro by catfishing him online and convincing him to meet at the garage. But when Giles arrived, he was attacked from behind by a man in a hockey mask with a stun baton, who drug him into the garage, which was covered in plastic wrap. After a violent struggle between the two, Giles managed to break free and attract the attention of a nearby couple, to which Mark would walk out with his mask still on and claim he was just playing a prank on a friend before leaving the scene. Giles wouldn't report this incident to the police, as he was embarrassed about the whole ordeal. But Giles wasn't the only one embarrassed, as Mark, who at this point thought of himself as the ultimate genius mastermind, was floored that everything he attempted ended in complete failure, and now all his would-be victim needed to do was call the cops and he'd be in real trouble. But unfortunately, he wouldn't let this embarrassment stop him, and decided to try again. In October of 2008, Mark would successfully catfish John Brian Altinger into meeting with him at the same garage, but being disappointed by the stun baton's ineffectiveness last time, he instead hit John over the head with a pipe, before killing him, dismembering him, and disposing of his body over the next 3 days. Now that he had successfully killed someone like Dexter, he worked to try to get away with it, by breaking into John's apartment and emailing all his friends that he went away on a spontaneous trip with the girl he met. But all of John's friends immediately knew something was wrong, and soon contacted the police, where they began an investigation. With the directions to the garage being provided to them by John's friends, the police visited the garage where they found Mark, who they noted was exceptionally calm. He assured them they were free to look around, but because his garage was set up to be a murder scene for a movie, that if they find anything alarming like blood, it's just decoration for the set. The police found traces of blood in multiple areas, and found that some had even been cleaned up. But after what Mark just told them, they just assumed the blood was fake blood, which is what should be on a movie set. However, Mark told them that he believes in authenticity for his films, and always uses real blood in them as a result. Mark believed he had the police completely fooled at this point, and to his credit, they actually believed his story up to this point. But soon after his meeting with the police, Mark would email the detectives claiming he might have more helpful information. That information being that a strange man came up to him and sold him their car for $40 around the time John went missing. So the police decided to check out the car in question, only to find out it was indeed John's car, which directly connected Mark to John when there was no connection previously. And since the car was valued at over $10,000 and was supposedly sold for only $40, the police knew Mark was definitely hiding something.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you're involved in the disappearance of John Altinger. No doubt in my mind at all, Mark.
Why?
So they officially decided to get a warrant and search Mark's property. Upon searching his car, they found blood and DNA from John, and also the pipe he used to bludgeon John, with John's blood and his hair still on it. And after getting access to Mark's computer, they found a 42-page document where Mark detailed his entire plan, including how he went about his murder and attempted murder step by step, which is available to read online if you want to see just how much of a narcissistic idiot this guy really was. On top of that massive self-report, Giles would also come forward and tell his story to the police after the story went around about a potential victim who got away.
This is the whole thing. This is what I'm thinking while I'm doing this. This guy, he had, if he was more professional, he could have killed me right away. Like right when I walked in, I didn't see him. He could have hit me over the head with a bat, a baton, or anything. He could have knocked me unconscious right away. And I don't know why he did that. His whole plan was to use this taser thing on me first, and that was stupid on his part. But he had many chances to kill me. He never did. So he had that's why I thought afterward all this happened, he had a bigger plan for me. I thought maybe he was going to handcuff me and take me somewhere and do something. It just wasn't professional. It was just like, it was maybe his first time. That's how I thought of it.
This would obviously be the nail in the coffin for Mark, and he would be arrested. After his trial on April 12th of 2011, Mark was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for 25 years. And even though he's locked up for life, it was reported in 2013 that Mark was able to purchase a TV within his prison cell, and still watches every episode of Dexter as they release. In 2012, Michael C. Hall would also comment on Mark's case by saying, "I wouldn't stop making Dexter because someone was fascinated by it only in that way. I try to tell myself that their fixated nature would have done it one way or the other, but it seems that Dexter had something to do with it. It's horrifying." Dexter author Jeff Lindsay would also comment on the case in 2012, because while we haven't mentioned it up to this point, Mark was also a fan of the books, with Dexter in the Dark being found among his belongings once his house was raided by police. Lindsay would go on to say, "Reading Dexter will not make you a killer. If you are not already capable of killing another human being in a cold, cruel, deliberate way, no book ever written will make you capable of doing so. There are no magic words that will turn you into a psychopath." But there you have it, everybody. 101 facts about Dexter. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you did, make sure to drop a like. While you're at it, be sure to comment what series you'd like to see 101 facts about next, and subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss it. Like I said earlier, Dexter is one of my favorite shows of all time. So when I first started making fact videos on this channel almost 10 years ago now, this was a video I was always looking to make. But I'm glad I waited, because this ended up being much more of a passion project. And I'm glad the skills I've developed over the past decade helped make this a good one. I've got a lot of big projects planned for 2025, so thank you for the continued support. And I'll see you all soon with the next video.